When you tell someone that a medicine for dogs cured your cancer, you better be ready for some skeptics. But Joe Tippins says it did save his life and others. And now even cancer researchers are open to the possibility it might be true.
Many of you know that the last video I put up was about Brenton Solwin of Mysteries to Search, that he had passed away of cancer recently. And only a few thousand of you watched it, and thank you for that. It always breaks my heart to see that if it's a video about, conspiracies or corruption, political stuff, it gets like this. It'll get 500,000 views. This one, 460,000 views. But when it's something about love and compassion, it's like nobody watches it. Everybody just skips it, and that breaks my heart. So thank you for everybody who watched it. But for this video that I'm doing now, those of you who just want information, flat out information, science, corruption in the FDA, corruption in the CDC, that type of stuff, stick around because that is in this video. But here at the beginning, I want to start with some testimonies about suppressed cancer research. And I know, I get it, that 90% or more of the people that we talk to, they can't hear us. They just cannot hear us. They're like, oh, that's sweet. You go to somebody you love, a grandparent, somebody who's dying of cancer, the doctor tells him, no, you have to take this chemotherapy and this radiation and all this. And then a few months later, they're like, well, it's not working. There's no hope for you. And you go to them and you say, hey, have you heard about this? Will you watch this video? And they're just like, oh, that's sweet, honey. And they can't hear you. They don't believe you. They have put all of their faith in this one person as if they're God and they know all of the answers. And so they can't hear anybody outside of the mainstream. Even my own parents, I've tried to talk to them about vaccines. I've tried to talk to them about their other medications, and they're just like, oh, that's sweet, honey. And then I'll see the supplement I brought sitting on their counter 3 years later unopened. So I know what it's like to try to share this information with people, and they just hear Charlie Brown's teacher. But the good news is some do hear. Some are willing to listen, especially those who are in desperate situations. Joe Tippins' life was saved because a guy he went to school with, who he knew his family, a veterinarian, called him when he found out that he was sent home to die of terminal cancer, and he told him, have you heard about this? And Joe listened. He listened, and now he's cancer-free and alive. And the next testimony you'll hear, a lady, the same thing. It wasn't Fenbendazole, but it was the Gerson Therapy, and her dad called her on the phone and said, have you considered this? And while she watched the others going through the prescribed treatment that the doctors wanted for her, they all perished, every single one of them. And she is completely cancer-free today. These are people who listened to a family member, who listened to an old school buddy, who listened. So it's worth a shot. If we can get this information out to one person, one life, it's worth it. It is worth it. So here we go. Here's some very valuable information.
So you have quite a story, and can you just tell us how this started and a little bit about your diagnosis and how this came to be?
Oh, sure. So in Labor Day weekend of 2016, 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, I had accepted a partnership position with a firm in Zurich, Switzerland, and had my Swiss green card and my apartment and my clothes were already moved, and I was moving to Switzerland. And I went into a weekend doc-in-a-box urgent care center because I had a little bit of nasal congestion and I didn't want to get on the long flight. Mm-hmm. And the guy did a chest X-ray and he even brought me back to look at it. It didn't look like anything to me. And he was kind of my first savior. He just wouldn't take no for an answer, and he bugged me all day Sunday and all day Monday before my Tuesday morning flight to Zurich. And finally, Monday afternoon, I went in for a CT, and I had a tumor in my left lobe of my lung, lower left lung, the size of my fist. With no symptoms. I had no symptoms, zero. I had no idea. And so I picked up the phone and called Switzerland and canceled my trip and canceled my acceptance of that job, and started a journey with MD Anderson in Houston, Texas. And, through a comedy of errors that weren't their fault, I got pneumonia along the way, and they had to change the regimen and double up the radiation. They fried my esophagus into bacon when nothing would go down or up.
Oh.
And instead of doing a feeding tube, I decided to live off of my fat stores and my muscle stores. And I went 8 weeks with no nutrients in my body, 0. And went in and IV fluids to keep me hydrated along the way. And in December of 16, 3 months later, I had a scan and they said, well, we have great news, Joe. The great big monster tumor in your lower left lung is gone. And by the way, the biopsy revealed that it was small cell lung cancer, which is the more aggressive of the two kinds of lung cancer. The good news is that it was gone from the big one was gone from my lower left lung, but the bad news is it had metastasized entirely from head to toe.
Oh.
I had tumors in my neck, in my stomach, my liver, my bladder, my pancreas, and in my bones from head to toe.
Wow.
And I don't know if your listeners know, but statistically, when you have small cell lung cancer that metastasizes that far afield, you're a goner.
Yeah.
Basically, the life expectancy goes below 1%, and the median life expectancy is around 3 months. And so, that sobering news was given me, and I was pretty much told, go home and hire hospice.
Yes.
And here's where the plot thickens and my story changed. I got a call the next day from a large animal veterinarian, cattle and horse doctor in Western Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma. And I went to college with this guy, and I knew his children and everybody. And, excuse me, he basically told me this crazy story about a scientist at Merck Animal Health on the veterinary medicine side that had been implanting cancer in her mice brains and stomachs and livers, and was doing cancer research. And her entire mouse population, as the story was told to me, her entire mouse population came down with intestinal parasites. And so she gave what is given to all animals, whether it's fish all the way up to elephants in the animal.
Yeah.
Is a drug called Fenbendazole, which is in the anthelmintic class of drugs. Anthelmintic only means to kill intestinal parasites.
Yes.
And lo and behold, she saved her mouse population from dying of intestinal parasites. But when she came back several weeks later, she cured the mice of cancer. And as the story went, she herself got 4-stage glioblastoma wrapped around her brainstem, was told to go home and hire hospice. He decided what the heck, started taking this stuff, and cleared herself in like 12 weeks. So that's a short-winded answer to the very next day. I started taking Fenbendazole, and I'm taking the veterinary product. The dog dewormer.
Is it like a pill or?
No, it's a dry, tasteless powder that people use to mix into dog food to deworm their dogs. And I do the same thing. I just mix it with yogurt or a smoothie, and sometimes I just throw it in the back of my throat and toss it down.
And is that something you had to have a prescription to have, or?
No, I mean, look, this is a veterinary medicine drug.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be taking it for human consumption, but what the heck?
Yeah.
Bought it at 1-800-PetMeds.com, and I'm such a good customer, I get a dog bone with each order. So, so I basically, through self-research, I did probably 2,000 or 3,000 hours of research myself, added a few other things to the regimen, which is now called the Joe Tippins Protocol, which is beyond bizarre to me.
Yeah.
But I added curcumin, bioavailable curcumin and CBD oil and vitamin E to the regimen. And I went through a period of unknown. I went all through January and February and March and April of 2017, waiting to die because the median life expectancy was 3 months, and I was not supposed to survive. But I felt fine. There were no symptoms. I felt great. I was, working again. I went in for a scan the first week of May of 17, so 3.5 months later, and I was all clear.
Wow.
So a previous PET scan that lit up like a Christmas tree from my neck to my pelvis and in my bones and in all my internal organs was now gone completely. And it's called NED, no evidence of disease, as you know.
Yes.
And so I didn't fess up to my doctors what I had been doing, but they were all kind of in shock.
Thought it was just a miracle kind of thing, or is that what they were?
No, and to be honest with you, and I'm learning a lot more as we go here. We now have hundreds or thousands of patients using this now.
When you tell someone that a medicine for dogs cured your cancer, you better be ready for some skeptics. But Joe Tippins says it did save his life and others. And now even cancer researchers are open to the possibility it might be true.
My neck, my liver, my pancreas, my bladder, in my bones, it was everywhere.
2 years ago, Joe Tippins says he was told to go home, call hospice, and say his goodbyes. The doctors were unanimous. He was going to die of small cell lung cancer.
Once that kind of cancer goes that far afield, the odds of survival are less than 1%, and the median life expectancy is 3 months.
Tippins says he went from 220 pounds to 110, but that was January of 2017. Today, Tippins is very much alive, and what he credits for his survival has doctors scratching their heads and the rest of us raising eyebrows.
About half the people think I'm just crazy, and half the people want to know more and dig deeper.
Tippins says he got a tip, not from a pharmacist, but a veterinarian. And in his desperation, he turned from people medicine to dog medicine, specifically Fenbendazole, or what you give a dog when it has worms.
Truth is stranger than fiction, you know.
Just 3 months later, Tippins says his cancer was gone.
I'm usually skeptical, and I was, and maybe still am, about this one. But there's an interesting background to this.
Cancer researchers like Stephen Prescott are skeptical, but they also are not dismissing this anti-parasitic's potential. He says Tippins is not the first person to potentially benefit, and maybe not the last.
Scientists at many credible places have done work on this for years.
And that's the important statement right there, that scientists have done work on this for years. This isn't something like some wackos like, oh, I just went to Walmart and bought some dog wormer and now I'm healed. This is an actual research program. And as always, I will put all of the links below. This is just one article, but it cites some of the clinical research data and some of the publications and peer-reviewed publications on this exact chemical. So even though his doctors told him there was no hope, just go home and you will perish, there was already studies on this. So again, this is the power of crowdsourcing the truth. Because it wasn't his doctor, it was an old friend from school who told him about this chemical. But anyway, this article was published in 2018, and it talks about articles that were published in magazines like Nature back in 2018. It talks about the clinical studies. In this paper, the authors cite potential anti-cancer mechanisms associated with fenbendazole, including disruption of microtubule function and proteasomal interference. But it was also associated with blocking the glucose uptake by cancer cells through reducing the expression of this transporter, yada, yada, yada. Because if you understand about cancer cells, they have something like 600 times more glucose receptors on them. That's why one of the treatments people talk about is going completely off of refined sugars and shutting off that glucose that feeds cancer cells and tumors. So that's been long known. So they say that this fenbendazole plays a part in disrupting that uptake. And the article goes on to explain lots of other things, lots of other theories about why this is so powerful, and the synergy when they combine it with other drugs that we know have an effect on cancer cells. And this article will also point you further down the road to cancertreatmentresearch.com and other papers, so you can study it out just like Joe did. Now, make no mistake, like Joe said, this is not what he took was a straight dog dewormer over the counter. This is the exact brand made by Merck that he took, a 1 gram packet a day, from what I understand. He has a website. Please go research the actual protocol that he took. Also, like I said, the link, the article that I just put, they discuss the protocol, the actual number of milligrams and all of that type of thing. Joe's blog, his website, and I believe his Facebook page too are all called My Cancer Story Rocks. His Facebook forum, I believe that's a closed forum now. They had to shut it down to just people who actually have been diagnosed with cancer and are looking for serious answers, because there was so much traffic after his story kind of went viral that it was taking away from those people who were really desperate and really trying to get healed now. And I can't make any recommendations at all, but you can research it all for yourself. I guess the basic consensus is, though, they say that this is not a toxic chemical for humans at all. It doesn't have any toxicity, if used appropriately. And you would have to, I think he used the 1 gram packets a day and 3 days on and 4 days off type scenario. Again, look this up for yourself. I'm not prescribing treatment. I'm just saying what I read. But that would be a 1 gram packet would be for a 10-pound dog dewormer. So, for a 100-pound dog, you would need 10 packets a day, for each of the 3 days. But as far as I understand, he didn't take it by the pound, as like a dewormer. It was enough to disrupt the tubule production and the glucose uptake and all of that with a very small amount that's not toxic to humans. But it is suspicious when we get to talking about big pharma and the medical mafia and all of that here in a minute, that since this chemical hasn't been found to be toxic to animals and is used, like Joe said, in everything from cows, horses, elephants, dogs, even down to fish. It's straight fenbendazole you can get for your fish. Big pharma doesn't use it, doesn't prescribe it at all for humans for intestinal parasites. They prescribe another chemical that is in the same family. It starts with an M. Here it is. Here's the word. Mebendazole, that word right there. And that's important because it's part of this family of drugs that have been tested with anti-cancer potential. Joe isn't reckless or crazy. He cured himself. And this is interesting. It talks about in some diseases that fenbendazole is proven more effective than the one that starts with an M, especially when tested against different types of fungal organisms that cause encephalitis. I mean, this is huge. But I wanted to point out the effectiveness in clinical studies against fungus, because that links into some research done by this doctor, and he says cancer is a fungus, and he's been saying this for years, that when they've done these biopsies, he says that they go all the way into the center of the tumors and they will find fungus. And they were using very simple treatments like baking soda. Essentially, it's baking soda because it kills fungus, and doing these injections into the tumors and having these incredible success rates. So I think that that's interesting, and I think these two puzzle pieces link together in several ways. Plus, you'll notice that in Joe's case, he had what they call the small cell version, and you can see it when it spreads. It spreads like a fungus, and it covers the organs and infiltrates everything. So clearly a lot of this research works together. If we could ever get, the enormous grants that big pharma give all of these universities to study all of these failed treatments, if we could ever get them to give these enormous grants to people like these doctors, and we could get a congress of these doctors together with all of this alternative research, and we could get them all at a round table and heavily funded, which of course they would never do because, you know, a customer cured is a customer lost. They're concerned with wealth, not just health. And when you're talking about $1 trillion, not $1 billion, trillion with a T, drug cartel, those CEOs sitting at those tables who are like, hey, we could finance these guys and lose $64 billion a year. That's just not a good business plan. And that stinks to look at it that way, to think that human life, the sanctity of life, means nothing. It's terrifying to think that there are sociopaths sitting, you know, in places of authority that would trade human life for profit. But, you know, we see, like with the abortion industry, there are sociopaths sitting in our governments and in the military industrial complex, and big pharma is a huge profitable industry. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. All the links will be below, so let's move on to some more. I'd like you to take a minute to listen to this woman who used Max Gerson's protocol.
Many former patients stay in touch with Charlotte Gerson and form lifelong friendships. One of these people is Debbie Wagner. Debbie was
diagnosed with ovarian cancer 9 years ago, stage 3B. My dad had told me about the Gerson Therapy, and I did research. I was planning to do chemo, and my dad had told me about this, and during the research I found out that the best way to cure yourself is to do it the healthy way, not put more poisons into your body that would kill you. And that's what chemo did, is it kills your body, the good cells and the bad cells. Where the Gerson Therapy, it rebuilds all your good cells so that it will be able to digest all the bad cells and get rid of them. I did the therapy, and it's 9 years and I'm cured. I have not had any reoccurrence of cancer. I was given the diagnosis from my doctors, and when they told me that I had the ovarian cancer, they had told me I had 6 to 9 months to live. And you know, when I didn't want to go against the doctor, when you have panic attacks, you believe in your doctor. But I believed in the Gerson Therapy more, and I went for it. And when I go down to UCLA, and that's who did all my blood work and my MRIs to check to see if everything was okay, I'd go into my doctor and he'd just look at me and he'd say, I just can't believe you're one of my cancer patients. I don't have cancer patients that come in with all the oomph and enthusiasm that you have and the energy you have. And that just really made me feel good every time I went in there. And seeing the patients that were in there, I did not look like a normal cancer patient. And to me, I have Charlotte and the Gerson Therapy to thank for that, because if I would have done the chemo the way I was supposed to, I truly, truly in my heart just don't think I'd be here. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I knew of 3 other ladies that had the same cancer I had, and they also were given the 6 to 9 months, and the longest one of them made it was 9 months, and they all 3 did the chemo. And I'm the only one here 9 years later, and I turned down chemo.
There are laws against healing cancer. The doctor is not allowed to try anything else. He must use only those treatments that have already proven to be failures. Imagine what we could do if this could be accepted. But there are laws against it. You're not allowed to heal. There's too much money to be made on drugs.
That was Dr. Gerson's daughter who carried on the treatment long after he passed. So that was just one case, but like I said, here's a book and a DVD set even with another 50 cases documented. There are tons of DVDs actually that you can get that have just testimony after testimony and will tell you what the treatment actually is. And you can just go on eBay here. You can find lots of these pretty reasonable if you really look around. That describes the entire therapy and how to do it from home. So, you know, here's a full DVD set for $14.99. But the crux of it is basically juicing and organic type juicing, because he studied this massive increase in cancer and all of these other illnesses once they started treating the soil with all of these terrible pesticides. And he started to notice the animals fleeing from it, that it was deadly to them. And then we were ingesting it. And so he started trying treatments with that and was incredibly successful. So they opened a clinic, and so people could come and they would prepare their meals. There were other things too. One of the things is a coffee enema, so that the liver will produce bile and detox itself, because when your body starts detoxing, there's a heavy load on those organs, and a liver that's already toxic, it can be really hard on the body. The majority of it was raw fruits and vegetables, but they did use different things. It depended on the type of cancer and all of that. It was pretty complex. One thing they used was calf liver because of certain enzymes that could only be found in these certain things. And so they would prepare meals and people would get well. You just heard one testimony, and there's mountains and mountains of documented testimonies if you just take the time to search them out and hear the people out. And here's the website for the Gerson Institute. It's just gerson.org. And I'll put the links below, and you can go here and find out about the therapy, treatment options, programs, clinics. It's international now. So the important thing that I wanted to point out about this one, it's the prime example. I'm going to play some clips of doctors saying that they've never heard of anybody ever being cured by the Gerson. And you've just heard one. I just showed you a book where you can get 50 more. And after I show these absurd clips from these doctors, I will show you even more. So it's really the prime example of how I know that a lot of these doctors don't know. They're just going from their textbook. They have like a book that Big Pharma gives them, and you go in there and you're like, oh, I have depression. And they're like, okay, well, here it's drug. They've been taught this in the universities. So they're just doing what they were taught to do. But on the other hand, there absolutely is an organized effort to disseminate disinformation about these treatments. And that's what I think these doctors show. For them to bald-faced lie right here to your faces, and these are the quote-unquote experts, to tell people that no, nobody's ever been healed by the Gerson therapy, it's an outright lie. So to somebody who is dying of cancer, they're losing their life, for an expert to tell them that there is no hope and there are no options and there is no cure and there is no treatment, there is no other research, that's criminal. Human beings should be given all of the information and they can make informed decisions for themselves. It's not for these people who sit as gods over us to say, no, it just doesn't work. To take people's chance at life away, like that woman I just showed you with the ovarian cancer, her daughter gave interview right after that and talked about helping her make the juices all summer and all of this stuff. And her daughter's 21 now. She was 12 years old when her mother was diagnosed with cancer. And like the woman said, all of the other patients who went the mainstream chemotherapy way were dead in 9 months.
I'm Shantice, I'm Debbie's daughter. I was 12 years old when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. One of the girls that I grew up with, we took our summer and made my mom's juices every day. And
so this is a child who would have been raised without her mother. This is a really big deal to see doctors either completely ill-informed when we look to them to be the people who know all the answers, or to be completely deceptive when people's lives and their loved ones' lives are what's at stake here. The doctors exposed in this little clip right here, this comes from an old movie called The Beautiful Truth. I think it was called The Beautiful Truth. And it was a documentary pointing out how Dr. Gerson had all this success, and yet all of the mainstream doctors were proven wrong over and over again.
No, I don't think there's any evidence that anybody's ever been cured by Gerson therapy.
Well, has the Gerson therapy ever cured a cancer patient?
Oh, of course not.
I've never interviewed any Gerson patients, It really is pointless.
What cigarette do you smoke, Doctor? More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. See how Camels agree with your throat.
It is very important for the Orthodox people to keep patients from coming to alternative treatments because they work. People have been so brainwashed for so long.
The reason that the food manufacturers are telling the public that it's safe is because they're making a huge profit off of it.
You have Monsanto, DuPont, Bayer, Syngenta, and Dow. Those are the big 5 companies behind genetically engineered foods, and they all share one thing in common. They're not agricultural companies, they're chemical companies.
So you don't have to be a super sleuth to figure out that what they're saying is absolutely true. Any old gumshoe can see the conflict of interest, that it's the same company. When you have companies like Bayer putting the toxins in the crops that cause all of this disease in Bayer's crop science division, and then you have Bayer creating all of these big pharma drugs in Bayer's pharmaceutical division. So it could be said that they're responsible for creating toxicity and creating the disease, and then the people who come down with it have to come to them and buy their pharmaceuticals for millions and millions and, internationally, trillions of dollars to treat these ailments. So when there's somebody who comes forward and says, oh, but you can treat this for pennies or dollars, a few dollars a week, and you can be healed, but the cure means that you don't buy all of these GMO foods from Monsanto and Bayer and companies like that, and you also don't buy any of these chemical pharmaceuticals from the same companies. Of course they're not going to support that. Of course they're going to slap 50,000 lawsuits on you and try to drive you out of the country. Of course they're the ones who are funding all of the research at all of the universities. Of course they're not going to give grants to people who will run them out of business and send them to bankruptcy court. This is the problem. But it's a crime against humanity. It is a crime against humanity. And like I said, I'm under no illusion that we can fight these enormous corporations or take down the establishment as a whole. God's going to handle that. The tribulation is going to bring down the entire established order of things. And that's horrible that we would have to go through a tribulation and a reset and a reboot, but it's for humanity's own good in the end. But this is something that will only happen by the hand of God. What we can do right now is crowdsource this information. Please share this. Share it across your social media. If you know somebody who's suffering, even if they're the 1 in 10 or the 1 in 100 that might listen, even if 99 of them won't, share it, because they might. And they're simply not going to hear it from most doctors. Most doctors will not put their careers at risk to tell people about anything outside of Big Pharma. They just won't put their careers at risk. They won't do it, which is unethical, to say the least. And speaking of ethics, that brings us back to Dr. Albert Schweitzer, the famous Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1952 for reverence for life, because he established hospitals in Africa. He was a missionary, a theologian, a Christian. Right here, the traditional Christian view. He had a reverence for life. And he was also one of the biggest fans of Dr. Gerson. When he had untreatable diseases in his own family, like tuberculosis and such, he went to Dr. Gerson. So he lived until 1965. So just like 20 years later, 30 years later, to have these doctors saying that they've never heard of anybody cured by Gerson, when famous Nobel Peace Prize winning doctors had tons of documentation of even their own families being healed by the Gerson therapy. It's ludicrous. It's either incredible ignorance on behalf of the modern medical community, or it's incredible corruption.
Charlotte carries on the work of her father through the establishment of the Gerson Institute in California and a hospital in Tijuana, Mexico. She loves to reminisce about Dr. Gerson's legacy.
We have some letters here of Albert Schweitzer, and they had a very active correspondence. My father, Dr. Gerson, and Albert Schweitzer, and his family and were patients. And he also expressed, in this letter, he expressed his admiration of the specific cancer research that Dr. Gerson did. Of course, all the letters are in German, and I'm trying to translate some. As well as the remarkable results that he saw, not only with cancer patients, but with his wife, who had tuberculosis, and their daughter, who had a very undecipherable skin disease.
Okay, so let's keep going. I don't want this to get so long that people won't watch it, because this is such valuable information. This is the third suppressed medical discovery. It's often called the Bob Beck Protocol. This is Dr. Robert Beck here giving a lecture at the Granada Forum. And he has lots of degrees. He even has a degree in physics. But the point is, this one is so vastly different from, say, a canine intestinal parasite chemical, fenbendazole, and so drastically different than a nutrition-based approach, like with the Gerson therapy. This is an electric pulse, a microcurrent, that has amazing results on lupus, HIV, cancer, and tons of other diseases that the mainstream medical community still tell everybody are incurable, air quotes implied. But the one thing that all of these vastly different treatments have in common is that they don't cost hardly anything. Pennies, dollars. You can make this device he's talking about, he puts the schematics out for free, and you can make it yourself for like under $50, and you can use it with a 9-volt battery for a long time. It's pennies, dollars a week. As part of his presentations, he used to hold up a pack of gum that he bought at the airport and say, for less than this pack of gum, you can heal yourself. And in fact, his paper that he passes out, he funded all this himself. And there's over $85,000 worth of research that he gives away for free. He doesn't sell any instruments or get any profit from other companies that he works with, because there are companies like Soda Instruments that make these for people who don't want to try to make them themselves. In fact, you can get that if you go to my suppressed cancer research tab over here on the left-hand side. In there, I think there's a phone number. I'll update it tonight while I'm working on this video, so the numbers and stuff are in there. I'll put a few more links in. But anyway, you can find the links and stuff to Soda Instruments in there. It's SOTA, or that's where I bought my micropulsars. And I've bought these. I bought these years ago, decades ago. Many of you know that I don't take vaccines. My family doesn't take vaccines. So I've been using all of these alternative methods to kill viruses, because we still come in contact with viruses. We just choose a different method to get rid of them. And this protocol has been really effective. I've used it for decades. Even the colloidal silver by itself, even if you don't do the micropulsing, especially now that they have the nano-sized colloidal silver that can cross the cell membranes better. So this is real. This is great science. People have known about this forever. That's where the saying, oh, they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, that's where that comes from, is because that's how they used to keep the children healthy. It was an antibiotic and antiviral, the silver. So they would let them suck on a silver spoon. But of course, only the rich families had real silverware. Or if you get a bad 3rd-degree burn, when I was in that house fire and got burned really bad, they sent me home with tubs of silver, like a silver sulfate cream, to cover all of the area that didn't have skin. So this is real. This is real science, and I can personally attest to this one. I love this system. I use it all the time. In fact, here's their website. It's just SOTA.com, soda.com, and they make almost all of the different devices, whether it's the magnetic pulsar or the one that goes through the bloodstream, all of the different types of devices that Dr. Bob Beck talked about in his presentations. So he has since passed. He began his research back around World War II. So he was already quite elderly in the 1990s when he started this research. But lots of people have continued the research, and I believe all of those are on my cancer research page on my website as well. And the micropulsar can also be used to make colloidal silver at home. So anyway, that's part of the protocol. But we'll start here with the patents. The title of his paper, where he gives out all of the research and information, is called Take Your Power Back. And I think that's the key here. That's what all of these have in common, is that for humans to know that they don't have to grovel at the feet of big pharma, that we actually have power, that knowledge is power, that we can go and get something that we can just pick up readily and take it and be healed, that we can be self-reliant, that it's as easy as and affordable that almost anybody for a couple of dollars could find the answer that they're looking for and be free of these things without losing their life savings, all of this, without handing all of that over to the establishment and then perishing anyway. It is taking our power back. Knowledge is power. Okay, so let's get to some of that knowledge. I'll start with him reading some of the patents from the 1990s when this discovery first came out.
If 5 years ago anyone had said that I would be standing before a group or any group telling you that there had been a breakthrough in medicine that's probably the most significant thing made in this century, I would have said this is con, this is snake oil, this is preposterous. But for the last 5 years, I've spent my own money, no government grants, no research funds, no university funds, in investigating a thing which literally has proven to be the most remarkable thing for all diseases that I have ever heard of personally, and I've been in this field for about 40 years. Are there any medical doctors here tonight? 1, 2, 3, 4. The reason I'm asking this is that I have a stack of IRB studies, and the doctors will recognize what these are. Laboratory reports of major hospitals around the United States, and until these are peer review published, I'm not supposed to show them to anyone who is not a medical doctor because of patient confidentiality. Now, how many of you have read that there is no cure for AIDS? We all have. That is an absolute lie. There has been a perfectly workable, 95% accurate cure for HIV and cancer and herpes and hepatitis and Epstein-Barr and about a dozen other incurable diseases, which was invented on March the 11th, 1990 at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City by a Dr. Callie and Wymans. Ivan, would you come up here and look over my shoulder for a second and make sure we're not doing a fasty? For those of you who don't get the paper, we're reading from U.S. Patent 5188738 that was presented to Dr. Colley on February the 23rd, 1993.
Absolutely right.
And this describes a process, as do 14 others from Harvard, MIT, stick around. This is going to get cute. You can get this patent in any patent office, have it faxed to you, have it sent by a patent deliverer. We're reading on page 1, column 1, we're going to read about here from lines 31 or 2, in which he says, because of this problem, the problem he's mentioning here, and it says so in the body of the text, there is no known antibiotic or vaccine for any of these incurable diseases. Because of this problem, the present invention has been devised to attenuate any bacteria, virus, including the AIDS, HIV virus, parasites, and fungus contained in blood contributed by a donor, either for transfusion or it's put back into the opposite arm, that these are rendered ineffective for infecting a normally healthy human cell. And here in column 2, line 9, that virus, that bacteria, virus, fungus, and or parasites contained in the blood or other bodily fluids are rendered ineffective to infect or affect normally healthy human cells. And then they go on and on and on in this patent, which has a number of granted claims, and before these claims could be granted, they had to provide the patent examiners with massive proof. Here, for example, treatment of virus in media at 100 microamperes for 3 minutes has been observed to substantially attenuate, render ineffective the AIDS virus. Similar treatment. Now there's been a cure, a known cure, and it costs $1.32 per patient. There's no money in this if they're trying to sell you combination therapies for $20,000 to $60,000 a year, but look what they do.
Now I'm going to jump in and distill this a little bit. Now the patent that he's discussing is for the actual technology, and the device or the instrumentation that they used was very invasive. One of the procedures was almost akin to dialysis, where they would actually remove the blood and run it through a machine that electrified it and then put it back into the body. Another one was almost sort of similar to acupuncture, but they would actually insert needles into where the tumors were and directly put the current in there. Things like that. So the patent was for the technology, and that electrifying the blood and electrifying the actual cancer cells was super effective. But then Dr. Beck, he's the one who improved upon those patents and developed non-invasive techniques. And he has an engineering degree as well, and he developed the actual devices and schematics for devices that could be placed on arteries outside of the body, on certain places on the skin close to the arteries, and deliver the same exact microcurrents into the veins, into the bloodstream. And then other devices that were magnetic pulsars that could be used for places like the prostate that gets so little blood flow. Anybody who's had a prostate infection, you know it's terrible to treat because regular antibiotics hardly reach the infection because of the lack of blood flow. So for areas like the prostate or even the lymph glands where these viruses will hide out sort of dormant and then reoccur several years later, the magnetic pulsar is another part of the protocol to treat areas like that. So the crux of it is the patents already existed. He discovered the medical research, and then he and his groups built upon that research and made it accessible to everybody and effective and affordable. And for all of those people who don't believe that this type of technology is real and that it really works, they're starting to trickle it out into the mainstream consciousness right now. Here's a mainstream news report where they're openly talking about starting to use electrification as a treatment for what they used to term inoperable tumors.
After a year of chemotherapy was one, albeit large, tumor in her liver.
A hot spot about the size of a golf ball. That's when Dr. Maceline suggested a new procedure called IRE, or Irreversible Electroporation.
The thing that's different about irreversible electroporation is that it doesn't use heat, it doesn't use cold.
And prior therapies used one of the two. You either froze a tumor or burned a tumor. This zaps a tumor using electricity to open tiny holes in cells, killing them.
It leaves intact things like nerves, blood vessels, bile ducts, which allows us to go into places that we were never able to approach before.
And Dr. Maceline uses IRE with a minimally invasive approach.
I take needles, I don't make any skin nicks. I just literally, I introduce the needles through the skin into the target tissue and do my ablation without making a major hole. And you can see as I page up and down that these needles are positioned at precise intervals throughout her liver, in and around the tumor.
It's been a year now since Joyce had IRE.
And I think all this is, and the radiologist agreed with me, this is just a scar. This is now all dead tissue.
And Dr. Maceline says IRE can be used to ablate tumors anywhere except the central nervous system, so not in the brain or spinal cord yet.
But almost anywhere else, within reason, I've treated legs, heads, chest, liver, throughout the abdomen, kidney, patients that are not surgical candidates, not radiation candidates. Now we're opening up opportunities for them for treatment that weren't there before.
And he thinks maybe within a decade, IRE will change how cancer is treated.
What we're doing today is better than what we did 10 years ago, but it's a far cry from what we want. And this may be the kind of technology that really helps us get there.
And as you can see, he's still using the techniques that were discussed in that patent. They talked about that, inserting needles and different types of methods like that. And so he's using the initial method, even though there's all of this documented evidence that Bob Beck presents, all the lab results, all of the clinical studies, all of that the non-invasive methods are already here, and you don't have to go to a hospital and have ablation and all of this stuff. And it's way more effective because, like he was talking about, the outside of the tissue, you actually have to put the electrical current in that way. This way, the electrical current goes through the blood and it reaches almost everywhere. So all of the cancer cells are affected. And it's funny that they always have the same type of press release. If you go back and watch the full interview, the full seminar with Bob Beck, he reads the magazine articles that came out at the time, and he includes the actual Xerox photocopies of those magazine articles in his pamphlets, where they say the exact same thing. He laughs about, well, they say it's 10 or 15 years and we'll be able to, use this type of technology on humans. And he's standing there, a couple of years later saying, well, look, I have foot-high stacks of lab reports showing we are using it and it's a huge success. But they totally disregard that. And then here we have all these decades down the road, these doctors saying the same type press release thing. Oh, well, we can use this on a few patients, but hopefully 10 years down the road, this will be an effective method to treat cancer. They keep saying the same thing over and over.
The only papers which I was able to find that got into the American press were Science News, March 30th, 1991, an article in Longevity magazine, and these are fully reprinted in your papers, electrocuting the AIDS virus. But what happened in the Longevity article, which was December 1992, page 14, Dr. Cully said, it will be 15 years before this process is ready for human experimentation. We have been doing it sub rosa with patient consent for over 5 years here, and we have the test results to prove it.
So it's just like anything, just like, say, the flying stealth technology. They had it decades and decades before they told us, they revealed the stealth at the air shows and stuff. They have this technology and they trickle it out. And so now they're using it at hospitals, but they are the only ones who can design the devices. So again, it's in the medical equipment. They're the ones who make the MRI machines and make all of the devices to distribute this type of healthcare. And then they make it illegal. They make it illegal for anybody else, even though these are machines that any inventor, any engineer, you can have labs. People could set up labs anywhere. It's becoming actually kind of a problem with genetic engineering and biohacking, and with the CRISPR-Cas9 technology with gene editing and things like that. It's becoming actually so easy that it's dangerous because people are doing it in basement labs. Scary times we live in. But the point is, there's no doubt that the medical mafia tries as best it can to just crank down control on everything so that they control it all. And we have to come to them if we want to live. But I'll put the link below so you can watch all of Dr. Robert Beck's seminar, at least this Granada Forum seminar, because he talks about a lot of stuff. And one of the things he mentions is this fundraising that people are, I mean, you see with our fundraisers, it's like pulling teeth to get people to donate to do something profound like we're trying to do to disseminate this information to the masses. But you put up a mainstream type cancer research fundraiser and people will donate millions and tens of millions of dollars to, they think, find the cure for cancer and run marathons and get pledges and do all of this stuff. And it's a farce. That money isn't going to find the cure. They have the cures, lots of them. And Dr. Robert Beck talks about one instance of the same thing with the HIV, the AIDS community, these fundraisers to find the cure for AIDS, right? Well, when he went and was giving these seminars to the AIDS community saying, we found it, here, it's free, you guys can be healed. The fundraisers, who you'd think they want the cure, right? That's what they're telling everybody, raising tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. People are giving them to these charities and fundraisers to find the cure. He said that the actual people organizing those fundraisers threatened his life, beat him. You guys have seen those type of violent protests now again in this era. But yeah, back then in the 90s, he thought this is great news to them. But no, the organizers, they wanted the hundreds of millions of dollars. They didn't care about the cure. That was their job. They were flying high on fundraising money. And he shows up with a cure and they threatened to burn the hotels down if they let him speak.
And what happened to this breakthrough, which is far more important than penicillin, antibiotics, anything you can name, it has been suppressed. And why has this information been withheld from you, which you can easily prove for yourself? Don't take my word for anything here, check it out. I found recently that the mob, owns about 51% of major pharmaceutical houses, as well as working the other side of the track with the illegal drugs from South and Central America and China.
Okay, let me jump in again here really fast for all of you people who might have just shut down and said, all right, we wanted the scientific research, but now you're talking conspiracy theories. No, we're not. These are facts. We've discussed them in tons of other videos if you want to invest the time to educate yourself on this stuff. But these are facts. Here's just one example. Everybody knows Whitey Bulger, right? Whitey Bulger, the big crime syndicate boss. Right here, federal prosecutors indicted him for 19 murders based on grand jury testimony of Kevin Weeks and all of these other crimes and trafficking cocaine and all of that type of thing. Well, his brother was a senator, right here, Whitey Bulger's brother. While Whitey was a distinguished crime boss in the Boston mob, his younger brother, William Michael Bulger, Billy Bulger, built a distinguished career in politics, becoming the longest-running president of the Massachusetts Senate. So what Dr. Beck is talking about is real, that the crime syndicates, the mafia, have expanded their reach, obviously, into our government. And so we have tons of corrupt politicians. And Billy Bulger isn't even, what somebody would consider a corrupt politician. He's just part of a mob family, and that's how they do it now. They split up. Some of them run the illegal rings, like Dr. Beck is talking about, the drug cartels, which we consider illegal drugs. And some of the mafia family members have gone into what we consider more respectable careers. But it's the same mafia families. Right here is an example of two brothers, one running the illegal drug side and one being an esteemed senator, the Bulger family. These are known mafia families. And that's how the cabal works. We know that. They infiltrate everything with the Hegelian dialectics. So please don't shut your mind down and be turned off to this information because you may not be aware of how the crime syndicate actually works. Dr. Beck is telling the truth. So, okay, I'll go back to his presentation and let him tell you about how he's been beat up.
We have 1.5 stacks, thank you very much, of these reports where every single one of these full-blown AIDS patients Every single one, although many of them were on life support, many of them required attendants to lift them from the bed onto the potty. These people are symptom-free now. Every single one of them is back at work. Not one of them has the symptoms of AIDS. So when you read in your newspaper, the baseball game this Saturday, the proceeds will be donated to a search for AIDS, that is an absolute lie. There is and has been a cure for AIDS, all AIDS, a cure for cancer, about 95% of it, 100% cure for Epstein-Barr, hepatitis, lupus, about a 50% cure for herpes, and I've been funding these out of my own pocket. I have absolutely nothing whatsoever for sale. God has been exceedingly good to me. I think I'm going about my Father's business here, and I'm paying for it myself, and I am giving it to the world. And as you know from the International AIDS Conference in Japan last year, Okinawa, they found that none of these AZTs, etc., prolong the life of one single AIDS patient one day. I see many of you have read these papers like I have. They're simply a promise. They're engineered to get your money while they give you hope. I was beaten up and bloodied. I was hit over the head. I had blood running down my face by AIDS Act Up. David Miller it was that was running this crusade in New York City in February. He called the hotel, told them if the hotel allowed me, this is the Hotel New Yorker and the Hotel Pennsylvania, they had the combination meeting at these two hotels, that they, AIDS Act Up, would burn down those hotels. So they gave me a bodyguard, but he wasn't around there all the time. They said, Bob, do not use the front door of any hotel here. Go around back, use the service entrance, use the one under the sidewalk. Never go out the front door of this hotel. Use the side entrance, service entrance, delivery entrances. And the last was there, and I had to run out front and get a shuttle to take me to the New Jersey airport to bring me home. There was a guy standing across the street with a video camera, and a guy that hit me over the head and bloodied me. The medical cartels in this country will charge you from $50,000 to $200,000 if you have terminal cancer, and this is for surgery and chemotherapy and radiation and hospital care. And for $1.32, you can cure yourself without doctors, without pharmaceuticals, without medicine, certainly without surgery, certainly without chemotherapy.
Okay, real quick, I just want to jump in and point out, for the sake of keeping this video up, because the thought and speech police have made it essentially illegal to say the word cure. We're not allowed to say certain words, whether we believe it or not. So I am not saying, I am not prescribing treatment or diagnosing anything. I want to say it again. I am just playing a clip of a doctor telling his own opinion, speaking from his heart what he believes, and presenting his research about why he believes that. So if the establishment thought and speech police hear the word cure in this video, I just want to point out, for my own legal battles, that I am not saying anything about a cure. I am just having a discussion with other interested people and showing them a conference that I watched a couple decades ago.
These are PCR tests, polymerase chain reaction, the test that Dr. Kary Mullis won the Nobel Prize on in 1993. We started with a group of about 24 AIDS subjects in 1995. Their counts, this one was 573,982 on August the 30th, 95. This one was 418,000, etc. Now let's take one of these along. You're not supposed to mention the name, although this chap came forward and said that I may use this information in any way. At this date, August the 11th, 1998, he had only about 3,063 particles of HIV in his blood. But now, as this test develops, if we look at this test, PCR, on 11/3/95, this was several months later, the count was less than 100, which means that it was 0 as far as the test was concerned, right? The paper was entitled Blood Electrification and Immunity. That means immune system restoration with microcurrents, a proven, startling, rapid, inexpensive, and safe discovery for positive incurable remissions. Now, we found that this information has been suppressed. The doctors who discovered this, and let me tell you about the discovery. In 1990, they put a couple of small platinum wires into a petri dish that contained highly infected human blood. And the infection here was a very, very strong dose of HIV, which is supposedly the cause of AIDS. They found that if they had when they had electrified this blood, the HIV could no longer attach to any receptor sites in the blood. That means the CD4, the T cells, helper cells, could not be infected by the HIV. The research team at Albert Einstein, their experiments described March 14th in Washington, D.C. at the first International Symposium on Combination Therapies showed that the shocked viruses lost the ability to make an enzyme crucial for their reproduction. And every time I lecture, about a dozen people came up. We had 800 people in one room on Saturday and say, Bob, this is an 80-year-old attorney. He's on my tape. You can hear him tell you this in his own voice. I was sent home to die. My cancer had metastasized all through my lymph system. I was told to go home and make my will. I, at the most, had about 2 or 3 weeks to live. Were any of you there when this man grabbed the microphone and gave us? Usually there are 2 or 3 people who heard this gentleman. He's 80 years old and an attorney. He said, I went home and I made my will, and I saw your article in some magazine. I think it was 73's. It's been republished in dozens of magazines. He said, I did it. I am now free of all cancer. My biopsies are clean. My CAT scans are clean. I went back to work, and having been an attorney, I had to work 16 hours for a few months to catch up for all the time that I was in intensive care. Now I'm jogging 3 miles a day, and there were tears running down his face. We've had women who have had lupus for about 10 years, barely able to make it from the couch in front of the television to the bedroom to the potty. Do any of you know Linda Wright, who comes to our Delsers meeting? She brought in a clean blood test one day and said, my doctor had to send this to 2 different labs. He's never seen a person with clean blood after that person has had lupus. It had been tracked for about several years. We have dozens of these people, and not one of these people went to the doctor for the cure except the people that are on this IRB, Institutional Review Board study, at a hospital in Huntington Beach and Newport Beach, California. Now the point is, in my humble opinion, and we can put anything against this because we know it's true at this time, when I first started this, I thought this is kind of interesting. I've looked into 500 things that never worked. The Rife machine never worked. Hulda Clark's machine does not work. Many of these devices work only marginally. And I thought, I'm about to be taken in again. I have built Lakowski multiple wave oscillators, as you know. I see some very old dear friends in here. I've built almost every electromedical device I've been in California, which is since World War II began. And these things worked at best marginally. But the thing which you can build for yourself, there is nothing you have to buy. The circuit diagram and all of the instructions for building this are in the paper. This is the one I designed in 1991 to make an experimental study with. There's a parts list on the back of the page, page 4, that tells you even if you don't know what a resistor is or a condenser or a relay, take it in, set it on the counter at Radio Shack, and give me one of these, and these, and it'll come up the total price, retail, for one. If you buy it this way, it costs $49.24. If you build it yourself, it'll cost $15 to $20. And this machine will not only make colloids, which is the most powerful medicine known to man, which is why the FDA has stamped it out recently. It will put this small electrification into your blood, which will neutralize Now, I hate this word. My doctorate in physics was 1955. My engineering degree from USC was 1948, and I was taught never to use this word, but I'm going to read something to you shortly that you will not believe until you see it with your own eyes. And I really suggest that you get this paper because it has a lot of work, it has a lot of information, it has the exact precise locations that we have found best in many years of research for placing the electrodes to get the maximum current into the blood. It is almost as though God the Creator had left a backdoor approach to the problems, and that the adversary, like the Holy Spirit, is within. The Bible says, look within, not without. And this time the adversary is within. The aliens in your blood are the thing that's holding down your lifespan to about 70 or 80 years. We knew that many, many generations ago, according to the sacred texts, they lived to be several hundred years old. Solomon, David, Methuselah, etc. So we've rated about a dozen different medical textbooks, including Gray's Anatomy, and we've published the exact spots of where you can access the lymph tissue where these germs are going to be hibernating after you're totally well and get a clean bill of health. In about 3 to 5 years, you will reinfect yourself because many of these viruses are latent, they're germinating. And with this information and these circuit diagrams and these instructions, we have literally given you back to yourselves. Now, we're going to show you all of this before I leave here. This is not my opinion anymore. We have enough proof that it is a statement of fact that we can bank on it, and running as fast as they can to stay out of the way of the Food and Drug Administration, because this works. Now here it comes again, boys and girls. Take back your power. You have heard tonight of the most effective way, and I stand before you telling you I am not selling you anything. I am giving this information away. Before they run out, this is the most valuable information, and you have a question, Ivan.
Tell about the negative beatitude, why you're giving this away.
I'm scared shitless of the Food and Drug Administration. If I sold anything, I'd probably go to jail. I've got to ruminate on this now. We're going to throw this open to questions. We could tell you about all the children that were born with AIDS that are well now. We could tell you about, and so we'll turn it over to our host and moderator.
Now, before we start the questions, I'd like Jane to come up here. She's been cured of cancer, and she has something to say.
Okay, I want to tell you, in case Bob exaggerated, that in April of 1995, I had cancer surgery, and I refused the radiation and chemotherapy. And I used, for the following, well, ever since then, I've been using the blood cleaner, the magnetic pulsar, the colloidal silver, and good nutrition. I go to Dr. Privatera in Covina, and I had a clean CAT scan in January of 96 and another clean CAT scan in September of 96.
Okay, I'm just going to play one more small clip before we move on to the last thing. But this is very important to point out. With all of these alternative remedies or treatments that we've discussed, a lot of them can be mixed and matched, but there are some serious dangers that I want to point out, because there is always the chance that somebody just might rush out to eBay and buy a pulsar and just slap it on and do absolutely no research. So I'd be remiss if I didn't point this out. Of course, a lot of these treatments can be used together, like especially the Gerson therapy, because it's nutritional, and even people who go the mainstream route and they're doing chemotherapy and radiation, they will do the juicing and the Gerson therapy while they're doing the mainstream therapies as well, because it helps their body survive that inundation with all of this toxic radiation and chemicals that they put in. I mean, these are literal poisons that kill tissue. So they'll mix and match, like the Gerson therapy with mainstream medicine. And those go together well. And you can do the Gerson therapy also with, you know, the Bob Beck protocols, or even the Joe Tippins protocols with Fenbendazole, because it's just food. You know, Gerson is just food. But the thing with the electrification, these microcurrents, that they open up entrances or make the cell walls more permeable. So, for instance, Bob Beck's team, the way they first discovered this was early on. One of the guys, he used to do the pulsing on his commute back and forth to work. And one day he stopped and had a beer, just a beer, after work with some of his buddies. And he had to sleep in his car. He passed out, essentially. They found that the effect of the drug, alcohol, was intensified over 20 times what it normally would be because of this effect on the cell walls. And there was one incident with a lady that didn't do any research, and she decided to mix herbal remedies with the microcurrent therapy. And so she used a very powerful, a highly potent Chinese herb that she was treating herself with, and then she slapped on the microcurrent pulsar. So it intensified the potency of that herb 20 to 30 times, and it became deadly. So other than that, I don't know of any other instances, but I wanted to be sure and point out that Dr. Robert Beck tells everybody this is not one of those. If you're on the mainstream treatments for HIV or cancer and you're on really powerful chemicals, you do not want to take those concurrently at the same time as you're using this micropulsar. Now, if you're not on any medications, like I said, I've used it in the morning, I've used it in the evening, I've used it in the middle of the day. I haven't seen any major side effects, you know, with responsible use. But the key word there is responsible. Just like Joe Tippins said in the beginning of this video, he did 2,000 to 3,000 hours of research. So please do your due diligence. You can't be self-reliant if you don't have any knowledge. You have to get all of the information. So please do that on any of these therapies. This is just an introduction video to what is out there, the information that is out there, because it's highly suppressed and hard to find. So this is just an introduction on these topics, and you know, I encourage everybody to investigate further before you step into self-reliance. You need to be, if you're going to take responsibility for your own life, you need to be responsible. I don't mean to condescend anybody or beat a dead horse, but I just want to reiterate, do not mix the Bob Beck protocol or these micropulsars or the soda instrument pulsars, any of that, with any of your medication, with prescription drugs, with recreational drugs, with the Fenbendazole treatment. If you think you can mix the Joe Tippins Fenbendazole protocol with the Bob Beck protocol, do not do it. Do not take Fenbendazole at the same time that you're using a micropulsar. Do not take any drugs. If you are on prescription drugs that you need to live, then do not use the micropulsar.
Very good question. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to get something straight. I'm on Adalat. I think that's somewhat like Procardia or nifedipine. Did you say that you should stop taking those, or say if you took this electronic treatment, say you start on the electronic treatment, you should stop taking the Adalat or nifedipine or Procardia?
I said that, yes, sir. Okay, next question.
Okay.
All right. If you must take these, try doing the blood cleaning about 10 minutes. If it makes you terribly sick, don't do the blood cleaning ever again until you're off the medication. Here it is again. You're listening? Listen up. It increases the dosage 20 to 30 times. And if you're taking one pill now and you take 20 or 30, you're going to disturb your heart whether you do anything or not. Don't do it. Stop. It's forbidden to you. Nobody will sell you one if he knows your doctor's put you on these poisons.
Now, here's a very interesting fourth avenue of alternative treatment, and this one is herbal. This is such a fascinating story. It was discovered by a veterinarian again, by a man whose last name was Hoxsey. And so it was all the rage for a while, and all of these Hoxsey cancer clinics were opened up across the United States. And this is what makes it especially interesting. You can see down here on the cover of this book all of these newspaper clippings with headlines like Judge Atwell upholds the Hoxsey cancer remedy, U.S. raids Hoxsey cancer clinic, Hoxsey awarded damages in libel suit. Because this is one of those examples of total coercion and bullying and systematic strong-arming by the establishment to close these cancer clinics and make it illegal to even discuss them. And he won several lawsuits because he could prove that the treatment was working. And how he discovered this is so interesting. You know the old adage, the old cliche, horse sense? He was a veterinarian, and he had a horse that had an enormous, almost volleyball size, soccer ball size tumor on it, and they had put it out to pasture the same way a lot of these doctors are doing with humans, sending them home to hospice. So he had put this horse out to pasture, that there wasn't anything that he could do to help it. And this horse seemed to instinctually, with horse sense, know what it needed to heal its body. So when it was set free, where it could have access to all of the plant life in the pasture, it went to this one specific part of the pasture and began eating specific herbs. And the doctor, the veterinarian, Dr. Hoxsey, would see this horse in this same part of the pasture every day and could see the tumor, the enormous tumor, shrinking and going away. So he began to investigate and do experiments on the different plants and herbs and chemicals that were in that part of the pasture. And he was able to isolate and make a concoction that he began giving to other animals. People were bringing their dogs and their other farm animals and stuff that had cancers to him, and they were being healed. So since it was just a natural herbal remedy, he began to let people take it, and they began to be healed, and such is the story of the Hoxsey cancer clinics. And, you know, they were opened up everywhere and stuff. And then came the slander campaign, which, like I said, he was awarded damages for. But it didn't stop the fact that by the end of it all, you know how the establishment propaganda machine works. We talk about it all the time on this channel, that it's only a handful of these people, these conglomerates, who own everything, all information distribution. So, you know, the same people who own the New York Times, own the Washington Post and Time Magazine and CBS and NBC and CNN. It's essentially all one big propaganda network. That's why we call it the mainstream news. It doesn't matter if you're watching CNN or MSNBC, you might get a little different flavor, but they've bought up all of the textbook publishing houses, the magazines, the newspapers, the Hollywood movie studios, all of it. So as the fake news goes in the mainstream now, of course, they will say in revisionist history that Hoxsey was a snake oil salesman, and the draconian establishment did the right thing by incessantly trying to destroy his life, his family, his career, and by prohibiting free American citizens to make choices for themselves. Because, you know, what they believe, socialists believe that they make all of the decisions for us. We're too stupid to be self-reliant or take care of ourselves or make our own medical decisions. No, they're so much smarter than us that they get to make all of the decisions for us. And, you know, that's because they're protecting us from ourselves, because the ruling class is so much smarter than the rest of us. But the truth of the matter is this herbal treatment was effective, extremely effective in a lot of cases. I'm not going to go, you know, into all of that. You can just look it up and do your own research on it. The Hoxsey Clinic was, at the time that I made that page on my website, I put the phone number on there to the Hoxsey Clinic in Mexico. So there was still a functioning clinic, although you would have to go out of the country to do it. But these are common herbs. This is just a natural remedy. So if you want to research it, here's some more information that might be and hopefully will be helpful to somebody. Again, I'm not saying that this or any of these are the absolute miracle cure for every single person. What I am saying is that I trust you enough as a sentient being, as a human being, a free citizen, to make your own decisions. and to have access to all of the information so you can make informed decisions instead of prejudice biased decisions based on propaganda that has been controlled and crafted and spoon-fed to you for generations as if it is the gospel truth. There's more. There are more options. There is more information.
Certainly never seen a politician or a president speak about it openly like President Trump did in the State of the Union address.
We also believe that patients with terminal conditions, terminal illness, should have access to experimental treatment immediately that could potentially save their lives. People who are terminally ill should not have to go from country to country to seek a cure. I want to give them a chance right here at home. It's time for Congress to give these wonderful, incredible Americans the right to try.
And it goes far beyond corrupt regulations, keeping dying people from having access to life-saving cures. There have been well over 80 holistic doctors, medical practitioners murdered in the last 2 years. So I'm going to play a little clip of Erin Elizabeth. She's kind of forefront researcher on this, and let her explain just a couple of the suspicious deaths. And then I'm going to cut to Dr. Jeff Bradstreet's recent death and some of his research and try to help you guys see why it's all happening right now.
June 19th, so 2.5 years ago, that Dr. Bradstreet, Jeff Bradstreet, was found dead in a river here in Southeast United States with a gunshot wound to his chest. And initially, I don't know that I would have ever covered it, except that I couldn't stand that all the mainstream were saying, like, literally just calling him a quack and saying that he committed suicide in a river. So, and I don't know, I didn't figure it took a rocket scientist to think that a medical doctor might not climb out into the middle of a raging river and successfully shoot himself in the chest, which an MD with access to any kind of drug he would want to take his life much more peacefully and quietly. Also, he had just come from, he had tried to check into the hotel, so that kind of throws off this kind of planned idea they said the room wasn't ready. He left his number. He went then to the store, got some hummus, bottled water, which we all know is like the hardest thing when you're traveling at hotels to come by. So makes sense. He bought bottled water and a bottle of wine for he and his wife, who he was meeting up with at the hotel. And then on the way back, just a few miles back in the small town of 12,000 here in the Southeast, he just allegedly just stopped the car along the side of the road, went down this steep kind of hill, climbed through the rocks and the bramble into a river, and shot himself in the chest all in a matter of minutes with still the food in the cars. So while I was writing the article on Dr. Bradstreet, we had Dr. Bruce Hedendahl and Dr. Baron Holt both found here on the coast of, both found on the coast of Florida, just a matter of miles, a couple hours away from us. Dr. Baron Holt was only 33 and literally, maybe less than an hour from where we live. And then with Bruce Hedendahl, he had just won, from what I understand, talking with his, I've talked with loved ones and family members from both of those doctors, that he had won a gold medal that day, was in amazing health. There were many unanswered questions as to how Bruce Hedendahl died, and Baron Holt was only 33. Now we finally found out that it was an alleged overdose. This guy was handing out, had Christian music playing in his office, and I am told he handed out Christian literature and was a dad, and I guess he was just doing illegal street drugs like Molly, somehow ingested these illegal street drugs, boom, found dead, 33. So it just kind of snowballed from there, for lack of better words. And yeah, it was very shocking to see so many of them die in such a short amount of time. And then just now we're up to 80 in not even quite 2.5 years.
Now, Dr. Bradstreet's family did raise enough money to hire a private investigator, as many of the families of these doctors have. So we'll go more into that in just a second. But I want to point out that the mainstream media always sort of bills Dr. Bradstreet as an anti-vaccination doctor. But in fact, the paper that he had published, the research paper he had published right before he and all of his colleagues mysteriously died in about 2.5 weeks, was about a cancer cure. And it was similar to what Dr. Robert Beck said. He found a marker that led to a very feasible potential cure for cancer. But it also led to a potential cure for autism and vaccine-related injuries and viruses and tons of other stuff. And he published this research right before, he mysteriously died. So this next clip I'm going to play explains all of that. Now, the gentleman in this clip is very excited. Please overlook that. Give him grace. He recorded this right in the heat of the moment, right at the exact same time when all of his colleagues in this alternative research field were suddenly dying. And he was very passionate and excited, and he sounds a little bit terrified. Please just give him grace and overlook that, because he gives a very succinct explanation of the science involved in this cancer cure that Dr. Bradstreet had discovered. And I feel like he does a great job explaining it in layman's terms so that all of us can understand.
One, because the story is so highly volatile that their lives are in danger, and the people that I talk to are absolutely scared for their lives. I am going to reveal to you why these alternative medical doctors are dying. And I don't want to call it a product, I'm going to call it a cure. It's called Gcmaf. To understand what Gcmaf is, I have to explain to you, and I will try to do it in layman's terms of how this was explained to me. Gcmaf is a naturally occurring process in the human body, okay? It starts off as a GC, called GC protein. And what happens is in the natural occurrence of the human body, that the GC protein in a human, in a absolutely healthy human being, will create its own natural GC macrophage activating factor to help protect the human immune system. Okay? Now, what was found is by these doctors is that there is something that's being introduced into the human body that is called nagalase. Okay, this nagalase protein is this. Nagalase is a protein made by all cancer cells and viruses. HIV, hepatitis B, C, influenza, the flu, herpes, Epstein-Barr virus, and others, right? What they found is this nagalase causes immunodeficiency, and it blocks production of naturally occurring GC macrophage activating factor, thus preventing the immune system from doing its job. Now, as it was explained to me, is that we're talking 16, 17, 1800s. We didn't have problems with cancers and, like we do today. One, you could think of it as being the population explosion. Is that it? No, that's not it. There is something that is being introduced into the human body that's causing this nagalase to block the naturally occurring production of Gcmaf. From here on out, I will just call that the macrophage activating factor. I will just call it Gcmaf. Okay. So how crazy is this nagalase? Nagalase precision, like a stealth bomber, the nagalase enzyme synthesized in and released from a cancer cell or a virus particle pinpoints the Gcmaf production facilities on the surface of your T and B lymphocytes and then wipes them out with the incredibly precise bomb. How precise? Let me put it this way. Nagalase locates and attacks one specific 2-electron bond located at and only at the 420th amino acid position on a huge protein molecule, one of tens of thousands of proteins, each containing millions of electrons. This is More astonishing, if that is possible, Nagalase never misses its target. There is no collateral damage. What Dr. Bradstreet found, considering that this Nagalase blocks the naturally occurring Gcmaf production in the human body, he found that with autistic children, that they had a highly elevated protein or a protein count of Nagalase. So then he determined that, and many of these other alternative medical doctors were determining is that the Nagalase surely was causing the autism. That's right, autism. So then they were starting to wonder, okay, well, if this is happening and it's occurring right at the very beginning of when autism is occurring, then it has to be being introduced into the human body at the time of, or just before the autism is occurring in the human body, which appears to be at a stage of infancy, not at birth. What does that tell you, everybody? That's right, that the Nagalase inhibitor, that this protein, Gcmaf protein blocker, is being introduced into the human body during vaccination.
So we all know how much money is made in the vaccine markets by big pharma, and especially when you can make something mandatory. Back when I was a child in school, I think we had, 3 to 5 vaccines. That's all I had into adulthood, and I seemed to be all right. But now children have to have 49 doses of vaccine by the time they're in kindergarten. And then, of course, they aggressively push all of their flu vaccines and pneumonia vaccines and STD vaccines and everything else they can dream up. But that's not really even why they offed this guy. As if it wouldn't be enough that they lose billions of dollars, from vaccines. And especially, you can imagine what they'd have to pay out in vaccine injuries with this sort of evidence. The government has settled several vaccine injury cases, and they're in the millions every time. But he goes on to talk about how then you can replace this missing chemical and you can cure cancer, you can cure autism, you can cure Parkinson's disease, and all sorts of other things. And it's not just holistic medicine. It's not just natural cures that are being suppressed. It's anything that cuts into the billionaire's pocketbook. So here's one. Remember in mid-December, Barry and Honey Sherman, both he and his wife were found dead in their mansion. And you'd say, oh, well, they're big pharma themselves. They were billionaire, pharmaceutical manufacturers. But what he did to become a billionaire was take business away from big pharma. He found that he could produce the generic forms of these drugs that big pharma was selling for astronomical prices. He went on sort of a circuit preaching that, saying that they are exploiting sick people. They are holding you hostage because they have these drugs and they're charging you thousands of times more than it takes to produce them and make a profit. So it's not that he didn't make profit, but he was saying, I can sell them for 1% or 10% of what they're selling them for, and I can still become a billionaire. So, of course, they killed him. But, of course, the weird thing is they find he and his wife in their mansion dead. It looks like a professional hit. They have ligature marks on their hands where their hands were tied together behind their backs, and they have belts around their throats, and they were choked to death, just like Phil Schneider and all these contract hits. So, but they ruled it immediately in December. They said, oh, it's a murder-suicide. How can you commit suicide or murder when your hands are tied behind your back or in front of you or anywhere? And why would you, if you were going to commit suicide, tie your own hands together? I mean, it's ludicrous. Their children hired private investigators, and that now they've come out recently and said, oh, it was not a murder-suicide. Now they're going to open an investigation that it was most obviously a contract killing. So the point is, it's not just holistic medicine that that they're against. Anybody who gets in their way, whether that's cutting into their profits through generic medicine, or whether that's, you know, people trying to expose that there are cures already for all of these things.
The next major priority for me and for all of us should be to lower the cost of health care and prescription drugs. Already as a result of my administration's efforts in 2018, drug prices experienced their single largest decline in 46 years.
I mean, really, is it any wonder why the deep state will stop at nothing to destroy this president? And regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump, regardless of where you come down on the Donald Trump issue, it's really irrelevant. The point is that these people have made themselves untouchable because they have politicians in these mafia families in place. So just like back during the QAnon series, when that whole phenomenon started and we discussed all of that, if you go back and watch those videos, how I talked about we have to distribute this information grassroots to get people to even wake up enough to accept an arrest. You hear all these people quarreling and saying, well, why hasn't Hillary been arrested? It's so obvious. She had secret servers back during Bill Clinton's era. We had Chinagate, like the uranium one scandal. Like, it's clear what's going on here. And what did I say? I said it's impossible for anybody to arrest these people because the criminals are politicians. So what did we see exactly? Anybody, even a president, tries to investigate Joe Biden, and it's the president who gets hauled in before the committees. The person trying to arrest the criminals, the person trying to investigate the criminals, are the ones that they convince society is the bad guy. You're a bad guy if you want to investigate criminals because they're politicians. So, oh, it has to be, it's for political motivations. Well, what if they're really criminals? What if this is really a crime syndicate, but they're also politicians? There's no way to ever investigate them because the witch hunt, the other side will always say, you're just doing it for political motivations. And you can see we're living it right now. And if you go back, like I said, to my QAnon series, you can hear me predict this exact thing, that until the masses wake up to this crime syndicate, that the world is being run by an international crime syndicate, then there's no way to arrest the criminals. They'll say, oh, look, it's Hitler. Hitler's rounding up his political opposition. They have no frame of reference to hang the events that they're seeing play out in front of their face. They have nothing to hang it on. So they just believe what the mainstream media says and what the crime syndicate says. So it is what it is. And you can see it. Just look around. You can see it with your own eyes. Nobody can investigate a Biden. Nobody can investigate a Clinton. I mean, we can see the criminals, those of us who are awake, but that's not going to stop the riots. It's not going to stop the civil war because more than half of the country are completely under the sway of their propaganda. They don't hear us. If they accidentally bump into us on social media, and that would be hard because the big tech giants work with the liberals. They suppress, they write the algorithms to ban us and suppress us and deplatform us and demonetize us and, you know, take us out of the search engine results and, you know, blacklist us, shadow ban us. So, but if they do happen to bump into us somewhere and hear our voice, the voice of reason, and we present them with any information that did not come from the mainstream, then they immediately shut down. Oh, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, you know? That's just how they're programmed. This power establishment, this cabal, this enormous crime syndicate, and even the medical mafia, I mean, they've covered all the bases. They have think tanks. They have the resources. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not against doctors and I'm not against modern medicine. I am so grateful for the doctors and these skilled surgeons and all of the technology, the fact that we can go in and get scans and MRIs and CAT scans and x-rays, and my dad having open heart surgery. He's having open heart surgery on the 16th. Please pray for him. But the incredible advances, they were almost able to go in through an artery and do a valve replacement without even opening his chest. I'm so grateful for all of the medical advances and for all of the doctors and surgeons who have invested so many years of their lives learning and studying and practicing, and all of the investment, the financial investment they made to get an education and a medical degree. I'm so grateful for all of it. So please don't take it that way. I thank God for all of it, and I love and appreciate doctors. But that doesn't change the fact that there is corruption throughout everything in society, every profession, every national government, all of that. So the medical community is no exception to that. And there are segments of the medical community who have sold out, who are in it for wealth and not health. It's that simple. And when they can place these types of people in positions of power within these industries, like the medical industry, then they make the rules for everybody else. So all of the honest doctors who really want to help people, the corrupt medical politicians, if you will, make it so that it's essentially illegal for them to even speak of these treatments without losing their license or getting malpractice suits or, all of this type of thing. So even though I'm so grateful for modern medicine, we have to be aware that this is going on. And because of this power structure that has taken over, this greedy power structure, our family members, our friends, our loved ones, many of them are dying and suffering needlessly at the hidden hand of this medical mafia. We're shown these types of stacks of money confiscated from the drug dealers all the time, and we're like, oh gosh, they're making so much money. And don't get me wrong, they are making a ton of money, tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions globally. So we all sort of understand why the drug cartels use machine guns to off their competition. But we have to realize that the legalized drug cartels, Big Pharma, they make way more, and they also have methods to off the competition. They don't use machine guns, they use the FDA, they use lawsuits, and they have a lot more at stake than the drug cartels. They make a ton more money than the illegal drug cartels. Like here, this is December 9th. Currently, they say that the drug cartels make $64 billion a year from the United States, from sales in the United States. And we're like, oh, we need to build a wall. We need to do all of this stuff to stop the drug cartel. I mean, $64 billion is a lot of money, but look at Big Pharma, the legalized drug cartels. $1.05 trillion. Like this article says, that's 1/4 of the entire budget for our federal government to run an entire country. So these people, over the course of the last decade, they can buy and sell countries. So you don't think they have a way without using machine guns to off their competition? Just look at who sits on the board of the FDA. It's Big Pharma. They decide what gets approved and what doesn't get approved. Like I said, they can have a drug that has a 90% failure rate, and they will still, a poison that they know kills healthy cells, and they will still sell it and charge millions of dollars to people's insurance companies for it, knowing that it kills healthy cells and it will not cure you. Like they told Joe Tippins, they gave him that experimental medication, and they told him straight out, they said, this isn't even designed for the small cell type of cancer that you have. So this will not work. We don't have any hope of it working, but
was also taking an experimental cancer-fighting drug. But Tippins says out of the 1,100 patients on that clinical trial, he was the only one cleared of cancer. Tippins says he was saved by the dog dewormer.
Well, my insurance company spent $1.2 million on me with traditional means, before I switched to a $5 a week medicine that actually saved me.
Prescott says he's now working with Tippins to organize a case study.
We're going to do it and see if we can confirm that in a very rigorous sort of clinical study sort of way that these patients had that kind of response.
As for Tippins,
I've got now over 40 success stories other than me.
He's sharing his story on an online blog that has already been read more than 100,000 times. The feedback? Positive or curious. Some, though, accuse Tippins of giving cancer patients false hope.
How do I answer that? I mean, if I've saved one other person other than me, it's worth it to me.
So the deep state establishment has set up this insurance reimbursement program. It's like a crime ring. They make it mandatory that everyone in the nation has to have insurance. Then they make the insurance companies only pay them for the drugs that the FDA approves. And like Joe just said, out of 1,100 people in their study, nobody was healed except him. And that wasn't by the mainstream drug they were giving him and the insurance companies were paying for. But of course, the insurance companies won't pay a penny for anything that the FDA doesn't approve and what isn't mainstream. But yeah, so they sell drugs that don't work and they approve them because they themselves sit on the board who approves them. Big Pharma, the heads of these corporations, the heads of these university studies that get the grants from Big Pharma, they are the ones who then sit on the committees on the FDA and approve their own drugs so that nobody gets paid except them. It's unbelievable that we allow this to go on. I mean, like here, you can go to any of the nominees. I'm not just picking on this one, but all of the heads of the FDA and everybody who sits on the boards, they are all part of Big Pharma. Here's just one I grabbed. President Obama nominated Dr. Robert Califf as the new head of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Who is he? Blah, blah, blah. And you go down, and what does it say? Not everyone is pleased by the appointment. However, in a statement, Dr. Michael Carome, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, director of the Public Citizens Health Research Group, said the Senate should reject the nomination due to Califf's ties to the pharmaceutical companies and medical device manufacturers. During his tenure at Duke University, he racked up a long history of extensive financial ties to multiple drug and medical device companies, and then it lists all the different companies he works for. So the people running the FDA are the people working for Big Pharma. Anyway, I could go on and on and on about the corruption of the deep state. But that's not what this video is about. If you're interested in all of that type of stuff, please just go check out my website. If this is your first time visiting my channel and my research, this whole Biggest Secret, Hidden in Plain Sight, that whole series is just tons, all of it. If it's posted on the website, all of these 3-hour documentaries, The Age of Deceit and The Black Awakening and Crimes Against Humanity. There's a technology section all about artificial intelligence and the technocrats and the neural implants and biohacking. There's just a ton of information on this type of deep state stuff, even a lot of medical stuff. The Event Horizon and the Children of God. This has a lot of medical information. These two videos are really pretty interesting. But anyway, the point is, the focus of this video isn't the deep state. The Lord put this on my heart because not only Brenton Salwin, whom I dearly loved, and we lost him to cancer just in the last couple of weeks. My uncle, my mom's brother, died of bone cancer this past week. My aunt, my dad's sister, also died of cancer in the last month. And my son's second grade teacher was diagnosed with breast cancer, which is just heart-wrenching. Please, everybody lift her up in prayer. Her name is Ashley. They have a sort of campaign going. It's #TeamAshley. But please pray for her. That's another alternative treatment that I could do a whole series of videos on. Just the numbers of documented cases of people who have been healed from cancer through the power of prayer. So for those who are believers and understand what I just said, please do join with me in prayer for Ashley. And if you need prayer or you know somebody who needs prayer for cancer or for anything, I will put down in the comments section, I will pin a prayer list. I will pin my comment to the top of the comment section, and that will be our prayer list. So just comment below that what you need prayer for, who needs prayer, and that way all of us who are out here and are prayer warriors and intercessors, then we will have quick access to it. We'll click on it right at the top, and we can pray through everybody who has requested prayer. And I hope that this video turns out to be a useful resource for you as well. If you have people in your life that might want to know about this information and these alternative treatments. And hopefully by putting several of these together all in one place and trying to articulate it in a semi-reasonable fashion. So if you can use this to open a door, open a conversation, start a conversation with somebody you love that may have received a terminal diagnosis, please do use it. Please do. In fact, if you want just more and more and more testimonies from people who have survived terminal cancer, here, beat stage 4 colon cancer, this is a great resource. This is the Templeton Wellness Foundation. This is James Templeton. He has his own cancer survival story. This is his book, I Used to Have Cancer, How I Found My Own Way Back to Health. And I believe his treatment was the vitamin C treatment, which there are clinics that do intravenous IV vitamin C transfusions to do mega doses of vitamin C. He might have just done pills, but I know that vitamin C is a pretty common therapy, alternative therapy that people are using. And some of these testimonies down here talk about that. But they talk about all different kinds of therapies and combinations of therapies that they used, and they beat it. They were told by the medical establishment, there is nothing that we can do. Your life is over. And they refused to receive that and embody that. Here's a couple of good testimonies. She defied medical logic and is going strong 22 years after, being told she would die of cancer. And then this one down here about this gentleman who was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. And anybody who knows about the pancreas and pancreatic cancer, it's a miracle. I mean, it's a medical miracle to survive it. So anyway, here's a whole bunch more testimonies. I encourage you to go and subscribe to James Templeton's channel. He's working really hard to gather up all of these testimonies into one place. I can only put, what did I put, a handful in this one video? He's dedicated his life and his YouTube channel to just constantly compiling all of this in one place for people who are desperate for answers, who are in the battle of their lives, for their very lives. It's unbelievably sad. So like I've said a million times, the only way that we can get this information out is grassroots. We have to work together and share this information because the establishment is working against us and they have all the resources in the world. So we need to be using our resources to help people live. This is costing people their lives because they can't access this information. It is here, but it's almost impossible to find in the search engines. The only reason that it started to pick up on James Templeton's site, see 4,000, 1,000 views, 24,000, is because of Joe Tippins. Because right here, that clip I showed at the very beginning of this video, I snagged that clip from this channel, from James Templeton's channel. James Templeton is the one who personally interviewed Joe Tippins and put up this video, how Joe Tippins beat terminal cancer with a $7 dog medicine or something like that. And it's got 250,000 views because I showed you those clips on the mainstream media that his story made a couple of mainstream news channels. And so that caused people to research it more. And this video went viral, which caused some of these other testimonies to start popping up in people's search feeds. So, please, you guys, let's work together and get this information out because every life matters. These are all people. These are people's mothers and brothers and fathers and sisters and daughters and sons that wouldn't be in the world right now if they would have believed there were no other options. And now they're healthy and alive. So please join forces with me. to spread this information as far and wide as we can. The establishment might have all the money, but we have each other, and that's all we need. That's all the resources we need. That's what the whole thing about going viral is. It shows you we can do this. We can do this, but we have to do it.